I think there's something very brave about the conversation you're trying to facilitate happening here, like the
Thank
broader conversation, not just the one with me,
you. Yeah.
because I think it requires a tremendous amount of courage to talk about things that people want to see as simple
Mhm.
and point out that they're not as simple as they think, and that they're not, that we have within us, we have within us all of those basic building blocks that lead us to where we are. Like, it's always this succession of small decisions, small choices. And I know, as someone who's been in relationships, who's engaged in infidelity in relationship, who's had partner who's engaged in infidelity in relationship, that I know any time, I don't know that there's ever been a time that I intentionally hurt any romantic partner.
I never expected this. When I started this company, it was really just a passion project of mine.
That's great.
And then when I started to recognize that I could meet a need that nobody else was willing to,
Yeah.
it was like, okay, I guess I can apply my professional skill set and expand it. And when you had wrote, "This sounds really important," that was hugely validating for me, because I think that there were a lot of professionals in the space who were insulting what I was doing and doing
So
a lot
interesting to me.
of combative attacks. Yeah.
I think this is all the exact kind of thing we should be talking about. But I think it's so amazing to me the things where we want to not talk about because we feel like if we don't talk about them, then they're not real or they're not something we have to think about. And I think that's so odd to me. But back to the prior thing you were saying, almost every real success story in any creative enterprise that I've ever seen, particularly in like the media podcast, YouTube channel, that kind of space.
Yeah.
It's always somebody that's like, yeah, I just was really interested in this, or I really felt like this needed to be said. And even if I connected with one person, that was all that would matter. That's how things start. That's how, when I talked to Lex about how he started, it really was just, he was genuinely curious. And he was like, yeah, I just would love to be able to get in a room with some of these people. I never thought this would be something I would do for a living,
Yeah, same.
And I love that. I love that because I can't tell you, I must get 6, 7 emails a day from people or their assistant saying, we really want you to come on. And 9 times out of 10, I'm not the slightest bit interested in it because it's so clear, even from the email, that they're not familiar with my work. Or if they're familiar with it, they're familiar with my pseudo celebrity. They've seen me or they've seen clips of me. And they clearly haven't even taken a minute to look at what have I talked about already? What do I have to say about? So they'll say, we're really interested in your take on relationships. And this is such a generic, approach. And it's such a generic sit down. We like to sit down with innovative thought leaders. And I'm like, what does that even mean? So yours was like, oh yeah, this is like a specific thought and focus and perspective and concept. And I was like, anything that's, because this for me is just a passion project too. Like I have a career. I'm successful in my career. I enjoy my career. I make more in a week of practicing law than I have in the entire duration of the book or any of those other things. So it's really like, I do all that stuff because I genuinely enjoy these conversations. I genuinely enjoy talking about this stuff.
When you shared that with me last time, it really helped propel me forward, because I think one of the things that I really struggled with was the potential of making money on this venture.
Yeah.
And it was like, it seemed gross to make money on something where there's a lot of guilt, despair, shame. I could see how people could take advantage. Like, I remember who I was 10 years ago. That girl was scared. Yeah, she totally wanted to pay her problems away. And when I really thought about it, and I'm coming out of, I think, 2 years of really assessing whether I want to go full speed with this.
Yeah.
And I realized that the money was never meant for me. I could empower other women to earn their own income by creating a business like this, and really allow them to discover financial independence, which I already have. And
Yeah.
so when
Yeah.
that all
I'll tell
occurred,
you, I'm not a money motivated guy.
me
Like I
neither.
drive a Jeep. A Jeep Wrangler. Like I love my Jeep, and it's like a 2021, and I have no plans to sell it. And I don't have a big house. I'm very comfortable. I mean, I'm not complaining at all. I've been broke in my life. I was broke all through college and law school, but like money's never been the motivator for me. It couldn't be. And
Mhm.
doing what I do for a living, I see people. I have clients worth hundreds of millions, even some clients that are worth billions, and they're just completely miserable. I really think money is, real solutions to imaginary problems and imaginary solutions
Oh
to real
my
problems.
God, I
And
love you.
it's palpable that you have to. I said to my sons, because they're both, adults now or close to it. And I said to them very early on, I was like, man, I don't know what to tell you to do, but just do something that you don't spend 5 days a week looking forward to. Like, do something that like by Sunday afternoon, you're like, oh, I can't wait to get back in and do that. And I've been doing this job 25 years. And I have to tell you, by Sunday afternoon, I'm like, I kind of can't wait for Monday. Like, I'm excited. And I love my private life. I love my leisure time, but I just find what I do so interesting and meaningful. And I love being good at it. Like there's something wonderful when you're at competence too. Like I think, enjoyment comes from competence to some degree.
Yeah, it does. I think that it's also what I love. I love thinking. Thinking is
Mhm.
probably one of my favorite things to do. And when
Mhm.
I realized that I had thought about this subject alone in isolation for a decade, I was like,
Yeah.
man, one of the things that really eliminates a lot of shame and the need to deceive others is through communication and connection. So it seemed very
100%.
simple to me that I would open Pandora's box and just kind of facilitate a conversation that nobody was really having. I
Yeah.
think
And that
that
needs
if
to
you're
happen.
yeah, and it was also, how are you going to solve a problem by not talking with the participants of the problem?
Right.
And, if society sees infidelity as a problem and all you're doing is
Right.
villainizing and dehumanizing the individuals who participate in it, I don't think you're
Right.
solving anything. I think you're just complaining about it very
Right.
loudly.
Yeah. And you know what? If it's like Solzhenitsyn said, if only there were evil people doing insidiously evil things, and we just had to segregate them from the rest of the world. But the line of good and evil runs through the human heart. And I tell you, like I've represented people who cheat. I've represented people who've been cheated on. I've represented the paramour. And the truth is, like, all I really see are just humans. I just see
Mhm.
people that want connection. They want love. They want to feel valuable. They want to feel understood, and they want to understand. Like they want to be interested, and they want to be interesting. Like there's all those very relatable human things that every single one of us wants. And very often in life, mess up the way we meet our needs, like, oh, I'm bored, so I'll eat. Like eating's not going to make me less bored, but it's, oh, okay. But my brain goes, oh no, that's what you want right now. That's
Mhm.
what you want right now. And it's, we've always been as a species, kind of awful at hitting the target that we're actually trying to hit, and
Yeah.
you also have to keep in mind too, there's so much of this that I think is intergenerational, because you have so many people who their parents had marriages that had some component of infidelity, whether it was sort of an open secret or a don't ask, don't tell, or
Mhm.
whether there was legitimately like, oh yeah, I met my dad's girlfriends, and there was just sort of this feeling of, okay, this is who he comes home to and has a family with, and this is
Yeah.
people who he has some connection with. And as a young person, not understanding, that distinction necessarily, or maybe coming to later in life going, oh, wait a minute, was that what that was? And so I think that also impacts the way that people, view these kinds of human relationships and interactions. One of my friends, who's a therapist by trade, although he's not my therapist, once said to me, because we were talking about like the names for things, like I
Mhm.
said, oh, this is sort of infidelity, but not, or this is sort of this, but it's not. He's, Jim, I don't eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I eat food. Like breakfast, lunch, and dinner are the names we give to food, but I don't eat breakfast. Breakfast isn't a food. Breakfast is a name we give for certain foods eaten at a certain time of the day, but it's just food. All you do is eat food. Like you don't eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you eat food. And I loved that because I really do think, look, this is all humans. This is all human beings yearning for connection, trying to find it successfully, unsuccessfully, in a self-destructive way, in a self-empowering way. That's all it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that so much. There was one person who said to me recently, he said, we're all born voices, but some of us die as echoes. And so what you were saying about, it being multiple generations, I thought long and hard about it because there was infidelity in my own parents' marriage. And when I thought about it, I was like, what? It's not that infidelity is contagious. I don't think it's contagious. And ultimately, I think it's the parent who models satisfaction in deceit is showing the child an inauthentic way to live. And
yeah, and there's something I think in us, though, as the adult children, because there was infidelity in my parents' marriage, and there was infidelity in my marriage. And I know there was some part of me that was trying to heal or validate, or in a very like idealization way, say like, oh, my dad's a good person. Or at least he's just as bad as me. Like he's not a bad person because I know I'm not a bad person. And I did this same thing and he did this same thing. And so that's okay. That's something that people do. And I think that's like a very, because again, we like to think when we're adults that, we've already gone through, individuation and we sort of left the idealization stage and stuff. But I don't think that's true because most people will tell you, like when you're, my mom died 8 years ago, I was already in my 40s, and it wasn't like the other deaths that have happened in my life. There's something very primal about your connection to your parents. And I think there is some unconscious part of us that wants to, by our failings or our moral failures or moral challenges, confirm to ourselves that our parents are good.
Yeah. Man, I have to tell you, this business was born out of the anger that I had towards my mother's death, or my stepmother's death. She was very much the hugely influential maternal figure in my life, all throughout my life, most stable, sustainable person to me. And when she had passed away, she asked us to burn all of her journals on her deathbed. And I was so fucking pissed. I was so fucking pissed because I was like, you think that there's anything that you could have done in the past that would change how much I love or perceive who you are, like when I have a firsthand experience with loving you. Like that's, what I felt about it.
But isn't that just our greatest fear? I mean,
to be loved differently based on what we've done in the past.
I think our greatest fear is that if people actually knew who we were, they couldn't possibly love us.
Oh, God.
To me, I've said it before, I'm not religious, but I believe if there was a devil, I don't think there is, but if there was a devil, the devil's principal function would be to convince us that we're so awful that God couldn't possibly love us. Because then that would give us the ability and it would give us the inclination to just go, well, you know what? Screw it. I suck. I might as well just do what I want to do. There's no, like, it's a straight line to nihilism. It's a straight line. Like, I know for me, it's like you're on your diet, you're being regimented, and then you like screw up, you eat something you weren't supposed to eat. And then you go, well, all right, maybe I guess I'll start next week. And then you just, you have 3, 4, whereas you could have just gone, okay, listen, I misstepped there, but I'll keep going. And it really is that our brains just say, no, look at you, you're an idiot, you're destined to fail. And so I really think, it's such a cliche AA, 12-step program thing, but I think we're only as sick as our secrets. I really do. I think that it's so scary to think that someone could know all of the things about us that we're ashamed of and still love us. Like that's the most frightening and beautiful thing in the world, because I have to tell you, like my self-talk, is brutal. My self-talk is just brutal. Every day, I'm just brutal in the way I talk to myself. And when I think about it, and I think like the voice in my head that goes, come on, man, get up. Like, what are you doing? Get your act together. You got to get to, why didn't you go to the gym this morning? You need to do this. I think if someone was talking to someone I love that way, I'd throttle that person. I would be like, whoa, you don't speak to him. Do you know what he's going through? You know the stress he has in his life? You're not being helpful. Okay. But I never show myself that grace. I never show myself that kind of love.
Maybe
and I really think that this is the great challenge, right? Is to sort of like that radical empathy and that ability to say, look, we are all, all the sinners are saints, all the criminals, like we all have good and bad within us. We contain multitudes. We're all capable of being all of the best and the worst of us. It's very funny. I have to have this discussion with clients all the time in the context of custody proceedings, because they'll come in like I'm some kind of confessor, like father confessor to them. And they'll say, look, I need to let you know I did this. And one time I did this. And I'll say to them, listen, just let me make your life a little easier. If you judge my parenting by my best moment as a parent, you're going to give me way too much credit. If you judge my parenting by my worst moment as a parent, you're going to give me way too little credit. The truth is, we're just this amalgam of all of those things. And I think it's the same in relationships. It's the same in marriage. It's the same in love and life. And, if you can't be judged or defined by your best or worst moment, I think that's so unfair.
Mm-hmm. God, I love you. Your ability to speak candidly and vulnerably is paramount, I think, to why you are in the position that you're in life. And
that's why I got beat up a lot in junior high.
No.
This was not a good, like, I grew up in a generation where you either got to be Clint Eastwood or Richard Simmons. Those were like the only two things a man could aspire to be. So the idea that you would actually like align with traditional male gender role, like all my heroes were like samurais in books and, men of like honor and men with a code. And I always wanted to be a man, like a good man, but I also, I was very emotional and very sensitive and very empathetic. And there was no place for that at the time in the male gender role. There was no place for that. It was like, I got called every homophobic slur you could ever be called, which is very confusing to me because I grew up in a household that was in no way homophobic. So I was like, well, if I was gay, that'd make a lot more sense, I guess, because everybody keeps calling me all these homophobic slurs, but I'm just not gay, So it was a very weird thing. And raising sons, it was really lovely for me to see how much progress has been made in the ability of men to have an emotional vocabulary, but also not descend into losing their backbone completely and losing any hint of masculinity or dominance or any, I hate the term, dominance gets misused, but like being decisive. I always say I always want to be a man of will, like I think there's value in being a man of will.
Yeah. Do you think that you are?
Yeah. I definitely am. Yeah. I found a profession that really lets me use that, and all of my hobby, doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. I tend to be fighting with things all the time, so.
I heard you're a biker. I think I read that somewhere.
Yeah, I ride motorcycles. I haven't in recent years because a friend of mine's son was actually killed in a motorcycle accident. And I went, that's, I really do love life. So I don't know that I want to kick out too early over something like that, but I still have a lot of, I guess it'd be traditionally masculine hobbies, I'm still very into pushing myself physically,
It's funny. Whenever I heard that you biked, I immediately assumed mountain hills in California, and my assumption was incorrect.
No, I was a motorcycle guy. Yeah, I was a marathon runner, a competitive marathon runner for years. And then I've been participating in fighting arts since I was like 9 years old. That's why my nose looked like this, been broken so many times. But I trained Brazilian jiu-jitsu, karate, judo, aikido, Muay Thai kickboxing, boxing, all that stuff.
That's amazing.
Those are, to me, that's like it's always like you're always fighting yourself. Your opponent's always yourself in those situations.
Kind of like that self-loathing talk inside of your head, right?
Yeah, and I think everybody has that. It's why we need each other. It's why we need people in our lives. I've always felt that's one of the things about romantic love is that you love who you are when you're with this person. Like anybody I ever talked to who's had an affair, they'll almost always say, oh, this had nothing to do with my spouse. This had to do with how this person made me feel. Like this is like I would look in the mirror and look at myself and I felt beautiful or I felt sexy or I felt desirable. And because this person found me fascinating and found me compelling. And I think I mentioned it to you in one of our prior conversations. I had a client who had all of these relationships with these young women. And it was discovered, in the process of his divorce. And I said to him, look, I'm your lawyer. You can tell me anything. Were you having, affairs? Were you sleeping with these women or having some kind of sexual contact? And he was like, no, not once, any of them. And I said, then what was in this for you? He's because you were like paying one's car lease and the other one, you were like sending money to her. Like what was going on? And he said, I don't know. I was their hero. I just felt like a hero. He's like, my wife, like I pay for a lot of things for her and I make sure she has a nice life. But, it's just, I kind of owe her that, I guess. That's my role is I'm her husband, but there was something about like these young women who were like, oh my God, like you can just make this incredibly big problem that's keeping me up nights just go away.
Yeah.
And he's like, if I'd slept with him, I actually think it would have taken something away from it. He's like, because there was something about like that I was just doing this because I just wanted to be heroic. And I remember thinking like, oh, that completely makes sense to me.
I also think that a man's desire to provide is innate, that when there's an opportunity to provide for somebody, it's very difficult for them to refuse meeting that desire.
And it's also very affirming. And there is some, I don't want to say sexual, but there is a charge. There's an emotional charge to it. Dude, the next time, if you don't think that, then go to any man in your life and be like, can you open this jar of pickles for me? Like we all are like, this jar? Here you go. We love it, because there's just this feeling of, look what I did, and it's very male. And it makes a lot of sense to me. I feel it. I don't understand it, but I feel it. And I think it really is a function of our desire to be heroic, our desire to feel of use, to feel that there's some purpose to us being here, so I've seen so many guys that, that was what was important to them. The sex is not, the sex is not what it was. The sex is a symbol of something, inaccurately attributed to Oscar Wilde. But there's a quote that everything in the world is about sex except for sex, which is about power. Yeah, we don't know who said it because it's misattributed to Oscar Wilde, but it's not something Oscar Wilde would have said. So nobody knows who said it. But yeah, to me, that's a brilliant piece of wisdom.
Yeah, that is a brilliant piece of wisdom. And I'm going to be thinking about that for probably weeks now. Thank you.
There you go. See, trying to inspire.
If you are the other woman in your relationship and you love this podcast, you would love the Other Women community. The Other Women community is a membership program designed to help other women just like you reclaim their relationship with themselves and heal from their affair. We provide a safe and supportive environment for you to open up and talk about your experiences. We give you the tools and resources you need to grow into an authentic, empowered individual. If you're ready to take the next step in your healing journey, head on over to theotherwomanandthewife.com/community to learn more about the membership and all it has to offer. All right, let's jump back into the episode.
I feel like we kind of just dived right into the conversation, James, and I'm happy
I guess so.
to do an intro.
Sometimes that's the best when it's just organic.
I think so. I really do. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on, are the laws, and this is more of like your professional and personal experience opinion.
Sure.
Why are infidelity laws so difficult to, achieve, put into place? / a lot of the women inside of my community fear that they are going to be reported on paperwork as the cause of somebody else's divorce because they participated in infidelity. And
the history of, infidelity or alienation of affection, all of those claims that arose out of the concept of a person having civil penalties or divorce-related penalties for engaging in relationships, particularly romantic sexual relationships outside the marriage. I mean, it's obviously, I understand that why people would want that, right? Like laws are supposed to codify the things that we think are valuable to prevent or protect in our society. But, the problem is we think in generalities and we live in details, and the law has to be very specific because any room within the law for interpretation or subjectivity really takes away from the enforceability of it and also creates opportunities for people like me to play games.
Oh.
So that's why the speed limit, I think we all agree the speed limit should be a sign that says, drive a reasonable pace, taking into consideration the weather conditions, the lighting conditions, the flow of traffic, and your own experience as a driver. That's a very long sign, right? So what do we do? 55. Okay, why is 54 too slow and 56 too fast? No, not really. But we got to pick something, so that's the something we pick. And I think that's because the law has to be very specific. So the problem with nobody wants to remove the infidelity laws, like the penal law that criminalizes adultery. Nobody wants to take it off the books because nobody wants to be the politician who gets up and goes, I think we got to make infidelity legal. What do y'all think? Because they might be married and they're going to have a lot of shit from their wife for it. But also, it's just not a popular position. Politicians just love certain issues. Like they love tough drunk driving laws because there's not a big pro-drunk driving lobby, and they love being tough on domestic violence because there's not a strong, we support domestic violence. You have to find politically neutral issues. Well, everybody would get up and say, I'm against infidelity. Of course.
Not me, though.
So they're never going to get rid of that stuff. So those laws. So what do? They don't enforce them. They don't prosecute people under them. They make them more and more legally insignificant. It's the same thing we've done in most jurisdictions when it comes to cannabis now. It's not legal federally, but we're not prosecuting anybody. And we're like, okay, then what are we doing? We just don't want to admit that it's basically legal now because that's what it is, I think that's a piece of it. I think it's also a question of what constitutes infidelity. And I think that is a tricky, thorny, subjective question because I think there are plenty of people that if you say to them, would you rather your spouse had or your romantic partner had a one-off, anonymous, physical, sexual connection with someone who they don't know, will never see again, take out the epidemiological aspect of it, but it was protected in some fashion at that, or they every single day are texting behind your back with their personal trainer who they've come to develop a tremendous emotional intimacy with. Which of those is more of a betrayal of you? And I think most people who are sane would say, oh, well, one of those is much harder to hear because it's one is just maybe a one-off thing and it's not really having any blowback or it doesn't really reflect necessarily on our relationship. Whereas the other, there's a sustained period of someone's need not being met and it's being met by an alternate person. And what is that taking away from what's available to me with my partner? So I think that's the challenge. What we've had to do in the law, I've been practicing law long enough that I remember when adultery was a grounds for divorce before New York became a no-fault state. And what we had to prove was inclination and opportunity, which was hilarious because inclination meant you had to show that there was something to support the fact that these people might want to have sex with each other, right? I always thought that was very funny because it would be okay, here's I show you exhibit A, this person's cleavage. What was the how do you prove inclination? It could be that, someone sent someone flowers, or it could be a love note that you find, but you had to find evidence because lawyers, it doesn't matter what I know, it matters what I can prove. So that was one piece. And then the other was opportunity. So you had to show inclination and opportunity. And what was opportunity? Opportunity was you were someplace where you could have sex, which to me was even funnier because obviously, yes, coming out of the motel, that's an easy one, right? That's why people in their mind, the divorce lawyer is always, there's the private eye next to the divorce lawyer taking the pictures outside the hotel with the telephoto lens. That's stuck in everyone's cultural memory, But it really, opportunity, people can have sex anywhere. People can have sex in the office, people can have sex in the changing room at a mall if you're adventurous enough. You can have sex almost anywhere. So the thought that we as lawyers, and judges had to go in and structure a case of proving that there was an inclination and then proving that there was an opportunity by a preponderance of the evidence. Then the other side could try to poke holes in that case through cross-examination. Like, what a colossal waste of time that was. And it was like, for what payoff? What should the payoff be? Because it was, for a period of time, the reason it became so ingrained in our cultural memory is you weren't allowed to seek alimony if you were guilty of adultery. So there was a tremendous financial incentive to catch your wife cheating, because if you could catch her cheating, she couldn't have alimony. But then, we developed a more sophisticated or elevated or evolved view of things where we said, all right, look, it doesn't change the fact that this person's going to need food and shelter and a life. It doesn't change the fact that this person probably forewent economic opportunities and lost, has some diminished lifetime earning capacity by virtue of the fact that they were married to this person. Like, it's not all eradicated because this person stepped out of their marriage once or on multiple occasions. That has nothing to do with it, So that's where we got away from it having any real meaningful legal significance. But of course, it's still in our cultural memory. There are still people who come in with tremendous hurt feelings into my office and they say, I want to go after the mistress, or I want to go after her lover. And I have to explain to the person that, there's no profit in that. There's no value to you in that. I also think there's a closure myth that people are walking around thinking that somehow if they could, punish that person, that would somehow take away the pain they feel. And I think that's a myth.
Oh, I have a burning question for you. What do you think prevents people who have been betrayed from moving past the point of pain from betrayal?
That's a great question. I think there's probably a lot of things. One is, I think that just as an affair helps us see ourselves, like part of the appeal of it, if not the main appeal of it, is how we feel, when we look in the mirror, we suddenly feel taller and sexier. And because why? We see ourselves through the eyes of this person who sees us as so desirable, right? That's the beauty of love, the intoxication of new love, is that feeling of, I guess I am amazing. I guess I am handsome. I guess I am very awesome. I don't feel like that, but if this person who I think is so lovely and beautiful and wonderful thinks I am, then maybe I am, maybe it's true that I'm wonderful, And similarly, by the way, when love or marriage, when marriage turns a lover into a relative, it's not shocking that no man's a hero to his butler, that you don't walk in and your partner. That's why I say when I wrote my book about, what you can learn from a divorce lawyer about how to stay married, is I often said, there's nothing wrong with just those small little things that you used to say to each other when you were first dating. Nobody doesn't want to hear, I married the prettiest girl in the whole world, just out of the blue, anybody who ever says to me, you're so handsome, it makes my day. There's nobody who I won't take that compliment from. That makes me very happy, So I think we stopped doing it with the people who are most present in our lives, were the people that we really need to do it with. But I think in infidelity situations, it's the same thing. I think it's the opposite of that phenomenon, which is if I've been cheated on, I must be less than, I must I think same thing. It changes the way you look at the person in the mirror. And instead of looking at the person in the mirror and going oh, I'm desirable. Oh, I know that because someone desires me right now. They just texted me and told me how sexy I am. It's the opposite. It's, oh, look, I'm not, because if I was, why would this person want someone other than me? And I think that's really hard for people to get past. I also think too, there's an elegance and beauty and simplicity and complete dishonesty in having just one thing you can blame everything wrong in your life on.
Yes.
I think there's just, I have so many clients that are it's that whore. It's that whore he ran off with. And I'm really? Your marriage was just perfect. It was perfect until that black cloud showed up and she just suddenly somehow with that perfume, Pepe Le Pew, suddenly he just, that happens, and they're no, it was fine. We were totally fine. We were totally, our marriage was perfect. And this just, and you go, I don't find that even vaguely plausible. And then you, of course, do a little more digging and you're like, oh yeah, they hadn't slept together in 5 years. It's 5 years? What did you think was going to happen? Like 5 years? Like really? Like that's incredible, And so I think that it's a wonderful thing to be able to have one thing you can blame. And by the way, it is that. People love simple explanations, So when you say, like, why did your marriage end? If I say, we both gradually fell into a pattern of habits that caused us to stop appreciating what we meant to each other, and we stopped noticing each other in ways that made the other feel very insignificant, and we took for granted our presence in each other's lives, and we allowed our shared love for our families and our child to become the focal point as opposed to the physical and emotional attraction we felt for each other, and the bandwidth we had was consumed by these other things rather than focused on each other in some significant way. That's a really long and kind of complicated explanation. Whereas going, yeah, she was fucking her personal trainer. That's easy. That's easy. That's great. It's super easy. Not my fault at all. And makes the other person into the bad guy. And that's great. That is so much better than nuance. That is so much easier than nuance,
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I do think that a lot of misery comes down to just being addicted to misery. And if you're a miserable person and being miserable makes you feel safe in your existence, you're going to be constantly looking for the things that make you miserable.
And I think doing what I do for a living, I jokingly say that I'm a full contact storyteller. Like my job's to tell someone's story while someone else is trying to tell a different story and take apart my story. So it's like the combination of fighting and storytelling.
Yeah.
And what I find is always funny when I talk to people about their story, because part of being someone who's going to tell other people's stories is I have to listen to their version of their story. And it's remarkable to me that, it's such a coincidence that people are almost always the hero of their own story. When they tell their story and they're the hero of the story, I am immediately skeptical. I am immediately looking at them going, really, because honest stories, are, yeah, you have moments that are heroic. You have moments where you're kind of villainous, like it's nuanced. And when someone says to me, here's the things I did right, and here's the things I kind of could have done better, and here's the thing I just completely fucked up, there's a lot of credibility in that, a lot of value in that. And when my job is to teach someone how to testify to their story, I really try to say to them, look, a little humble goes a long way because it adds so much to your credibility. But again, in infidelity, that's a very hard thing to do because, and again, there's also gender stuff tied into this that I think is thorny ground to get into in these times. I've said it before publicly, so I'm not afraid to say it again. I think when a man cheats, he's considered a piece of shit who can't control his urges and who has no self-control or discipline and doesn't care and has no morals. When a woman cheats, the man who she cheated on is also still a piece of shit because he wasn't meeting her needs. He wasn't satisfying her. He forced her into the arms of another person. Her infidelity was a voyage of self-discovery. It was a way for her to solidify that she had truly disconnected from him. It's not what in men, it's, oh, he just wanted to get his rocks off. Whereas with a woman, it's, no, she needed to find connection. And that feels very misandrous to me. It feels very unfair to me. It feels very dishonest to me. I'm not
your desire for justice so much because I think it leads you to places to think about things that most people don't even give, a second thought to.
Yeah, it's partly desire for justice. It's partly that I just spend so much time. Like I spend time with victims of intimate partner abuse and domestic violence. And I spend time with perpetrators of intimate partner abuse and domestic violence. And I have to tell you, I'm not excusing horrible behavior or villainous behavior. But man, if you spend enough time in a room talking to somebody, you just realize, oh, fuck, they're not evil. Yeah. They mistake it for happiness. Like they they're just confused. They got it wrong. Like very often the wrong behavior was modeled to them. They grew up in a home where violence was acceptable, or they were a victim of violence. Like it's hurt people hurting people. And when you do enough of that, you just start to, I don't know, it takes a lot of that judgment piece of us, that reflex of like bad person, good person, bad person. Like it takes that out of you to some degree.
I love that because I think before my affair, I had been really focused on what it meant to be a good Christian girl. And then after the affair, I was like, what if I just tried to figure out what it meant to be human? What does it really mean to be human rather than trying to reach a bar that somebody else set for me?
I was raised very Catholic and I went to Catholic school. I was what they called an altar boy, now Acolyte, right? And I remember growing up with the comfort of that very defined set of rules. Like, here's what's right and here's what's wrong. And if you do these things, you're a good person. And if you do these things, you're a bad person. And I loved it was like pro wrestling, it was very obvious who the good guy and the bad guy was, and I kind of love that because when you're a kid, like you love that. Human emotional complexity is not really on the menu. You really prefer like good and bad, and that's it. It's very clean. And I remember though, and I still to this day, I find the Christian Gospels very inspiring. And I find the core message, what I believe to be the core message of Jesus, which is that the kingdom of God is within you and all around you. And that God loves all of us, and that God created us, and that anything that could create all of us and loves us like a good parent, I can't imagine anything that we could do that would make that want to condemn us to eternal torment. Like maybe not want to return our calls for a couple of weeks or might yell at us, but I can't imagine like eternal torment. That seems like a hell of a thing, And also that all of the things in me, they were all theoretically created by whatever that omnipotent creator deity is. So they created in me the parts of me that are flawed, the parts of me that are, and it's too simple of an explanation to say, oh, no, that's the devil. All right, but God created the devil. Why? Like, why? There has to be something in it. There's some purpose to it, to showing us, no, you have to go down this road to figure out that's not the right road, or you have to allow yourself to make this mistake so that you can figure out what it is you really want. I've learned so much from the ways I've screwed up relationships, from the mistakes I've made. I learned so much about what I don't want to feel, and to me, that's the hell that's worth thinking about. The hell that's worth thinking about is the hell inside of you when you're out of a state of alignment with your own morality.
You are such a freaking poet, man. Oh my God. I'm probably going to listen to this episode a few times just to hear you say the things that you've said again.
You have my number. You could just call me.
Oh, you're so cute. I love you. I will call you. Man, James, this is a really powerful conversation for me to take in. And I really just want to express my gratitude to you for being you. I think that your ability to talk to the person, not the behavior or the role that they play in somebody else's life, is incredibly powerful. And I'm extremely grateful that you even, intercepted my message and that you could comprehend it.
I love what you're doing here. I really do. Like I turn down a lot of the offers I get these days to have conversations with people because they want to have the same conversation over and over again. And they want to have it for roughly the same reason, which is just feed the machine of content that the world is always looking for something interesting to listen to. And I think there's something very brave about the conversation you're trying to facilitate happening here, like the broader conversation, not just the one with me.
Yeah.
Because I think it requires a tremendous amount of courage to talk about things that people want to see as simple and point out that they're not as simple as they think, and that they're not, that we have within us, all of those basic building blocks that lead us to where we are. Like it's always this succession of small decisions, small choices. And I know as someone who's been in relationships, who's engaged in infidelity in relationship, who's had partner who's engaged in infidelity in relationship, that I know any time, I don't know if there's ever been a time that I intentionally hurt any romantic partner.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever have, but I have hurt and failed lots of romantic partners.
Yeah.
And I've been hurt by and failed by many romantic partners. And I don't know if it was ever intentional. Like I know that they were not trying to hurt me. They just were trying to find happiness. They were trying to feel full. They were trying to feel love, and I don't know, it's so much harder to be angry at someone when you understand that's what they were trying to do. It's like the difference between someone stealing bread because they don't want you to be able to eat and someone stealing bread because they're hungry.
Yeah.
If you're stealing bread because you want to take food away from me, yeah, that's mean. That's vindictive. But most of the time, people don't steal bread for that reason. People steal bread because they're hungry or someone they love is hungry. And I get that. Like, I get that. That has nothing to do with me. You weren't even thinking about me. You weren't thinking about, does this person need the bread? You're like, dude, I don't know, but I know I do, or I know the people I love do. So it's the same thing. It's just it's the emotional bread, that people are looking for. They're like, I just want to be loved. I want to feel valuable. I want to feel important. I want to feel significant. And it's not a coincidence, that people too, when they're in their late 30s, early 40s, early 50s, like those solid midlife years, that a lot of times that's where, a lot of infidelity is taking place because our self-definition is changing so much at that stage. We transition from being a single person to maybe being a parent. And then what comes with that, like how much of our desirability, sexuality, sensuality, how much of that starts to vanish as a function of that, how our bodies change as we age, like our feeling of desirability changes. Like there's it's such a complex equation and yet so simple of an equation, right?
Yeah. It's the identity, I think. And one of the things that I've really come to terms with is the fact that the only constant is change. And if I'm not embracing the fact that change is the only constant, am I just resisting a universal truth of the world that I live in?
Yeah. And, I had my own therapist. I had a really interesting session maybe a year or two ago with him where I was talking about something had changed in my life. I think it might've been something with one of my younger son who's in his mid-20s. And I just feel really anxious about this. And he said, I'm not trying to tell you what you feel, but think about your vocabulary there. Because when you say you feel anxious, you kind of pathologize it. And I would say that you feel disoriented. And when I say disoriented, he's like, when you're trying to reorient your life or you're trying to reorient yourself internally, you have to become disoriented to reorient. You have to. Like to reconfigure something, you have to take it apart from what it was. So to be reoriented into something different, something better, something new, something that fits a different stage of life, whatever it might be, you have to first become disoriented. It's Richard Bach said, the bird breaks free of the egg is the world. To be born, you must destroy a world, but the bird flies to God. And if you think about that, like to a bird, like you're in this egg and it's the only thing you've ever known. It's the only world you've ever known. And everything you need is there in the egg where it's nice and warm. But it's okay, I'm gradually getting too big for this thing. And you have to break this shell. And that must be terrifying because you don't know what's out there. You don't know what this is. This is the only world you've ever known. But think about if the bird didn't break from that, it would never know what it's like to fly. It would never know what's out there waiting for it. And so I think it's the same thing. Like you have to be disoriented in order to reorient yourself. And change is very hard, but change is unavoidable. It's in our DNA, literally,
Yeah. Yeah, it totally is. Well, I've loved having you on the podcast. And I seriously, I don't even care about the podcast at this point. I think that this conversation with you was so good for me to have just as an individual, and being able to share it with others is definitely, I know there are a lot of people who are looking forward to this.
All of these conversations for me are conversations that A, I enjoy, and B, that I get a lot from, and C, you write a book in private and you sort of think, oh, I wonder if this is going to resonate with anybody, and I've walked out of conversations. Like I walked out of my first episode of Soft White Underbelly, and I remember kind of going, oh, that was fun. I don't know what that was. Like that won't, maybe a few people will see it. And now it's 6 million people have viewed that thing. And it's been like clipped like tens of millions of times on TikTok and things like that. And I still to this day kind of don't know what people saw in it.
Is it
Like
the pretty
it's
one of
it's
you?
something.
Is it the really pretty one of you on the bar stool with your sleeve showing? Yeah, it's a very compelling visual, that's for sure.
Well,
And
Mark Liotta, who runs that channel, is an amazing photographer, and that's sort of, he has the eye of a photographer.
See, and I'm so bad at image. Like this entire thing was set up and designed by somebody else because I could not give more, or I couldn't care less about what I look like or somebody else's opinion. Like that type of stuff kind of just like falls by the wayside, I think, when you really get in touch with what's valuable to you.
To me though, because so I'm giving a TED Talk. I was invited to give a TED Talk in October. And, it was a big deal. Like I'm sharing the stage with Malcolm Gladwell and all these like brilliant people. And they said to me like, okay, and TED takes their stuff seriously. Like you are assigned like people who help you. And then you like give them a draft of your speech and then they help you tweak it. And then you have to memorize. You're not allowed to use any notes or a teleprompter. Like you got to really know it, And so I was excited to do it. I am excited to do it. But what was funny to me is I could sit down and have this conversation with you. We could talk for another 4 hours and it would easy.
Yeah.
The first time I sat down for that Soft White Underbelly interview, I think I talked for 2.5, 3 hours. And it was like, like it was just flowing easy. And I could sit and write. Like I could write a book pretty easily. Like the first 60 days of the pandemic, I wrote like 120,000 words because I didn't know what else to do. The courts were closed. And I was like, all right, let me just sit and write. And I just wrote. So I can do those two things really well, talk extemporaneously and write. Writing a speech, I'm terrible at. I don't know what it is. I've sent them so many drafts of, what do you think of this? And they're like, nah, try again. Because there's something about, if they just gave me the microphone and let me walk out on stage, I'm sure I'd kill.
We are so alike. You and I are so fucking alike. Anytime I get in front of a script, I'm like, this isn't me. This is not me. I'm not a script reader.
Right. But even if I wrote the script, like I'm right. But there's something about like writing this script. So they gave me a wonderful suggestion. This young woman who is one of the TED people. She said to me, look, she said, there's great dictation software out there. She's just turn it on and start talking. She's turn it on and just give the TED Talk you want to give. And then just let the dictation software and send it to us. And I was like, that's the way to do it. And that's exactly what I did. It's exactly what I did.
A tool, right? A tool and utilizing a tool, how it was meant to be utilized. That's amazing.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast episode. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts on it. If you've made it this far, you're likely someone who is invested in the journey of being the other woman. We understand that this can be a difficult and complex experience, which is why we offer guided coaching to help you heal and move forward. We encourage you to explore the links in the episode description or visit theotherwomanandthewife.com/coaching to learn more about our exclusive coaching program and apply today. Thank you again for your support, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.